Today we have the honor of speaking with Brother Michael Perry, the former Minister General of the Friars Minor, and a man who knew firsthand the spirit and heart of Pope Francis. Brother Michael was present for the funeral of Pope Francis, a simple, powerful liturgy that marked the end of a remarkable life of service. So, welcome to Friar Time. Let's get talking. Welcome, Michael, and thank you for being here. I really
Thank you, David.
appreciate
Thanks for the
that.
invitation, the opportunity.
I think it's going to be a great conversation. First thing, do you think that the conclave that's coming up is going to be about continuity or course correction?
Watch the movie. I'm kidding.
I did.
Um, it's so I think it depends on how you define continuity and how you might define change.
I think continuity, and my question
Oh,
is, are we going to see the direction of the church that Pope Francis set, which is by most people's concept progressive, open, inclusive, or we're going to see a course correction, which would be more, let's move it back again uh, toward the idea of Benedict and John Paul II, which is a little more doctrine, a little more that type of a church.
okay.
Um, I think that my understanding is that if a man is pope for over 7 years, he has the opportunity to change the direction of the church in a permanent way. So Francis was pope 12 years. He had named more cardinals than anybody else in history. And so the conclave itself has more cardinals appointed by him than any other pope. However that turns out, we don't know, obviously, because as they say, you walk in a pope, walk out a cardinal.
Yes.
But anyway, what do you think this conclave is going to do? Anything that you?
Well, as in previous conclaves, they're spending time now talking about what's going on inside the church,
Hmm.
what's going on in the relationship of church to the world, and what's going on in the world. And then they begin to identify some elements, some themes. What I understood, the last time when they met in these congregations and then when they met together, they produced a document that was 300 pages. Anyone saw it. I mean, this was among the cardinals who were present. It was a closed document, but and that became kind of the kind of the playbook, if you will, for some of what Pope Francis was doing. And that's why I raised the question about continuity and change. Part of the direction that Pope Francis took was not simply because he had one perspective or another toward the church, and we know he was a mix of both.
Hmm.
On the
Yes.
social front, he was extremely open, very, very advanced. On the doctrinal side, and even his last message to an introduction to a book that came out just a few days ago, he reinstated this for young people in catechism, and he reinstated that the central doctrines of the church have not changed. So that's why I'm kind of discussing. But I think one thing is most of the people who are talking about for cardinals possibly being elected a pope, most of them have some variety of mix. So you've got Cardinal Tagle, who is much more on the social front. And the LGBTQ question for him is a question that needs to be brought into the discussions of the church.
Right.
Whereas you have other cardinals who would say, no, that's not appropriate. It's the doctrine's clear. So I think I, I don't know. I don't frankly know which direction it's going to fall. I do think there's going to be an element of continuity on the social dimension, uh, liturgically and in terms of the synodal process, etc., which it tends to be more inclusive. The fact that there are more women working in the Vatican and two holding top positions now in the
Right.
Vatican. So will that continue? Will that expand? It's a question. And what about the issue of the discussion, not of priestly ordination, but of either some would argue reinstating the practice
Deacon.
of women as deacons. These are questions that I know they'll come up, but I don't even want to take a guess. I think it's going to be yes and something else,
Mm.
and then the something else will be the surprise factor. I think. Is that clear at all?
Yeah, I think so. Um, these are obviously questions that, uh, as Catholics, we believe the Holy Spirit is part of this whole mix
Yeah.
too. So, but one of the questions that I see a number of people talking about is with some of the papabili that we've seen. in terms of their age. So, do you think the next pope should be young and energetic, or an older transitional figure? So, do we want longevity or do we want leadership? I mean, I think Pope Francis was seen as a placeholder for a while because of his age. I don't think they expected him to have a papacy of 12 years, even. I don't think he did either, but it just seems like, you have that conundrum. Somebody young who's elected, like I think there's one who is maybe 67,
60.
60. So
A Franciscan called Pierre
Pizza
Pizzaballa.
Valley, right. So now we're talking about somebody who could reign 30 years, really. Uh, do we want something like that, or do we want somebody who's, 80 who maybe another 10 years?
When I was in Rome this time, I was talking to people at different levels. I talked to some people inside the Vatican. I talked to Franciscans. I talked to lay people in the streets of a few people, families I know. My sense there was, and it's probably just because it's in the air, they'll probably look for someone who would not be too young. Someone 67 is kind of a median age for a number of the guys who are in that range, 67 to 70. Cardinal Parolin is 70. Cardinal Tagli is 67. So the question is, do they want? I think that's a legitimate question. How long should someone be elected for?
Right.
I don't think they're going to look for someone who's purely transitional. I think then on one side there'll be some who are looking for someone who can reinstate the dignity, what they would say, the dignity of the papacy.
How do you mean that?
They want it to be more formal. They want it to be
Oh,
more, they be more focused on doctrine, less focused on the social. Uh, I noticed there were others who were talking about the centrality of continuing the social message, particularly today when there's so much division in the world, there's so much hate, there's so much even international threat, even now talking about the potential for nuclear war or some international conflagration. So I think that they're going to be looking, I think there's going to be enough of a push that someone at least will keep a focus on the social
uh,
dimension of the church. But I don't think it's going to be someone who's 60, nor will it be someone who's 80. I think it's going to be someone, it could be someone who's 70 plus or minus. But that's also because some of the key people that are talked about are in that age range.
right.
So,
Because I mean, I think Francis embraced risk. I mean, he opened doors to the marginalized, challenged the comfort zones of the Curia, the average Catholic. So I guess the question would be that, um, in terms of longevity or leadership, I think it's also, are we going to retreat from the boldness of the papacy that was Francis?
and unfortunately or fortunately, that's personality driven in part. So
Yeah,
it depends on who it all depends on the person who will be elected. Some of those people who are being talked about are people who are much more reserved. Um, but remember, Cardinal Bergoglio was not someone known in Argentina who smiled.
right. Pictures of him is amazing,
Just not someone who
amazing.
smiled. Now again,
Yeah.
and maybe it's because of in Argentina, because of the weight of the history, his memory of all the suffering, etc., the people there. But at the same time, they say that when he would go to the barrios to visit people, he didn't he was always late for mass when he was going. Why? Because he had heard that Jean's mother or Henry's father was sick, and he'd stop by in their home and see them. He knew the names.
Hmm.
And there they say he was like, he would just light up. And if anybody was ever with him in Rome, you'd go to a meeting, a large meeting, or even a liturgy, and it looks like he was just kind of slumping over and going down. And the moment he had a chance to interact with someone, they'd bring up the gifts for the mass for the offering. He'd light up, and then from that point on, it became alive. And so, I think that keep in mind that the grace of office. We don't think of that very often, but there is something that comes, and it can go in two directions. People can either become really much more of who God and who people would like for them to become, much more open, much more aware, or they can close themselves down. And I don't know which this is personality and spirit. And let's
Hmm.
pray that the spirit is stronger than personality in all cases.
It's interesting. There was an article in the New York Times about uh, he, I guess, on the day he died, the day before he died, I guess, he called in a nurse who had been
Hmm.
taking care of him to thank them for all they had done for him. And then I guess he said to them, let's take a spin in the square one last time.
Yeah.
Uh, which you could see how he was lit up when he was just driving through quickly through the square. So I think exactly what you said. It's the touch of the people that made him light up.
Which takes us back. He didn't want to be buried as a pope. He wanted to be buried as
Hmm.
a pastor of someone, the good shepherd. And I think this is something who he was. He just, this good shepherd, this embracing and holding the lambs, holding each person, holding each situation in his arms. And another tribute to his spirit, the meeting of two presidents inside the basilica while
Yeah.
he's watching from the casket and almost sending an energy, I think, to them,
Hmm.
saying, "Grow up. You've got to get through this war. Help each other. Let's end this
It's
war
on that.
and make sure that territorial rights are respected. Let's make sure that the dignity is respected." And that was an amazing.
Yeah.
He did it his way.
Yeah. He did it his way. Yes. Michael, thank you so much for being here with us and for helping us answer a lot of questions that people are wondering all over this whole planet and to look at new possibilities for the church. My friends, the death of any pope is not just the end of a papacy, it's the closing of a chapter in the life of the church. Pope Francis, in his papacy, challenged the church to be poorer, humbler, and more courageous. And now, with the conclave ahead, the eyes of the world and the hearts of the faithful turn to what comes next. What kind of church do we want to be? Where do we stand? How boldly are we willing to live the gospel life? This is a moment for prayer. It's also a moment for clarity. May the Holy Spirit guide the cardinals, and may the legacy of Pope Francis challenge us all not to retreat into comfort, but to reach outward with mercy, justice, and joy to everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Father David, and this is Friar Time.